we've become broadcasters, man.
Fantastic. This looks good, actually. Okay, so...
Okay.
Yeah.
It's up?
Yes, it's up. And let me just get the questions.
Yeah, we are up.
So we should start in another 1 minute. If you can mute your laptop. Great.
Laptop cannot be muted.
Okay, yeah, just speaking on it.
I'm just saying, okay.
Okay, I think it's 11. So do you want to give it a start?
Yeah.
And I'll keep an eye on any comments that come in.
All that.
Over to you.
Okay, so great. So I guess work from home has made us use technology to its best. Even in the virtual environment, we've been kind of interacting on the Two2Tango, and with today, Sapta, today also marks the day when we launch our Tete-a-Tete series. And hopefully we'll be talking to many more speakers. And today we are graced with the presence of Praveen, who happens to be a good friend also. So welcome, Praveen. And just to give a background about what the series is all about, the channel Two2Tango was launched by me and Sapta last year with a thought that we wanted to interact with people. We wanted to bring the best of the stories that that are around, not just in the corporate world, in the various segments of life, and we wanted to bring all those stories out. We've had the opportunity to interact with many people, from various backgrounds, etc. And we kind of realized that Tete-a-Tete series could be an interesting way to pick up people from certain backgrounds, certain parts of the industry, people who've done a couple of things in their lives, and interact with them, understand their journey, and obviously there's always a lot to learn from people. So with this session, we launched the Tete-a-Tete series episode number 1 with Praveen Mokkapati. Sapta, you want to take over?
Yes, I think it's a fantastic day because we have been experimenting as well, and any change begins with experiments. So I think this is one of our ways in which we would try to reach you. And if you like this sessions, do let us know. We are keeping our YouTube live open, so in case if you have any questions for Praveen, for us, drop a comment and we will take it up and make it as interactive as possible. I think that's where the fun is. So with that, Praveen, our first guest, welcome Praveen to the show. Praveen is an associate director at ISB, one of the premier colleges in India. And one of the key roles, and the reason that we have invited Praveen today is in this current economic scenario, I think one of the key roles that Praveen does for the college is build partnerships with the industry and different industry forums. And I think that's the knowledge that we want to leverage from Praveen on this show. So Praveen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sapta.
So Praveen, we would like to hear from you, and I think all of our audience would like to hear from you about your story, your introduction. So if you can introduce yourself, your background, that would be fantastic.
Sure, great. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be on your channel, a channel which I have personally followed since the time of its inception. And quite clearly, it has come a long way, and experiments, Sapta, like you rightly said, is the way to go. So with that, I'd like to just quickly introduce myself. Having been a mechanical engineer by qualification, I have Studied bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering. So my master's was at Texas A&M, and soon after I graduated, I had the chance to work in Houston. One of those desk jobs, working in core engineering kind of jobs. That was on the anvil, and on the other side, I heard about an opportunity for a German company which was wanting to set up its Indian subsidiary, and that seemed to be like a very interesting opportunity. And I wondered why somebody would choose a greenhorn to sort of take up that responsibility, right? And it's something which you don't hear about, and you don't get to see those opportunities come your way. And it was a big moment, a moment that I took, a decision that I took much against the wishes of my faculty advisor and also my parents. And that was also in a way for me to see how I was able to take risks early on in my career. That sort of set that stage. So I came back to India immediately after I graduated, and to join a company that did not exist. So I was right from setting up of the company incorporation to scaling it up. It is a company called CADFEM. It's a German company, like I said, largely based in Central Europe, which is the German-speaking region, working on simulation technology, and how simulation can potentially help is by virtual product development, and in that way you can reduce testing, and you can develop innovative products. So my role was largely to help scale the business, communicate the value of technology to a lot of different industry verticals, ranging from automotive, aerospace, energy, consumer goods. There was a wide variety of industries which were looking at adopting simulation in India at that point in time. This was more than a decade back. And it was a great time to be in business. Of course, the financial crisis hit at that point in time. It was tough to do business, but there was a lot of learning along the way. 7 years later, I wasn't sure. I mean, it was sort of like a tunnel vision, if you will. And then MBA was something which seemed to be a logical option. And I applied to the only school that accepted me, thankfully, and that was IIM Bangalore. It was the 1-year EPGP program, and had a chance to spend life-changing moments, in terms of learning, in terms of the peer network. Folks like Debashish came into my life, and the many other aspects which are so memorable. Me heading out to a global marketing competition in Spain, winning that, all these are memories which I cannot forget. And then all these allowed me to demonstrate that I've been able to to some extent transfer my skills into newer areas which I previously was not challenged with. And that led me to join a company called Servion, and took me to Southeast Asia. I was in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, and I was there for a year. And again, I was communicating technology to the largest markets over there. And it taught me many things: how business is done in completely new cultures, how it is different, considering what we normally get to see in India. So that was a big learning. But then, the company I started with, CADFEM, wanted also to expand their operations in Southeast Asia. And given my recent experience, they asked me to do that and also manage their marketing initiatives in both regions. So I took up that interesting challenge, and I was there with them for a couple of years. After that, again, there was this thought of doing something radical. And given that I was always into trying new things, I had a chance to venture into the venture capital industry, working with startups, something which came very natural to me, given the kind of environment that I've always been under. And I was able to relate to their challenges, and I was able to help them with certain pointers, different ways in which they can scale. So I was in this company called Anthill Ventures. And I had a span of nearly about 20-25 startups across multiple sectors: media and entertainment, fintech to some extent. Then we had smart cities, urban tech, and healthcare, health tech startups. So that was that. And then I was also starting to interact with Indian School of Business on multiple occasions. And I realized about, there is this technology research center within ISB. And given that I'm so close to technology, I felt this could be an interesting challenge in my career. So I recently joined them in December 2019. And this is a center that works on topics related to technology and its impact on businesses, and society, and the multiple themes and topics that the center is associated with. So that's in short about my introduction. And just a disclaimer before we get this session going. So any views and observations that come from this conversation are entirely mine, and they're not verified or affiliated by my organization or by any other person. So please have that disclaimer in mind while we're having this conversation. Over to you, Sapna.
Absolutely, Praveen, and thanks for a walkthrough. And I've been lucky to be a part of one part of your journey at IIM Bangalore during our days at the EPGP. So yeah, I've seen you in person, and as I just wanted to pick up a couple of things when you were talking about your your profile, your journey, professional journey, and you talked about how radical your changes have been. Starting from a mechanical engineer, moving into marketing, sales, etc. And you also mentioned about the days of the financial crisis, 2008, and how you being part of an industry, a part of a company, how you were tackling all those issues. I guess in the current times, there's no better example of the radical times that we have in terms of the impact that it has had on people around, right? The economy. Up till a couple of weeks back, people were still contemplating as to what will be the impact, what's the extent. But slowly it is sinking in that the impact is going to be a long-term impact. So, you having worked across multiple geographies, multiple industries, multiple companies, venture capitalists, and all that, what is your thought on the current kind of setup with the whole economy right now? What do you feel? To what extent are we seeing the dent as of now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique situation, really, right? And a black swan event, as most economists would call it. For those who don't know what a black swan is, it really is a rarely occurring event having negative consequences. And furthermore, given that it is so rare, it is very difficult to predict when it will happen. So you cannot really prepare yourself for that. And this was coined by a former Wall Street trader called, I believe, Nassim Taleb. It's really put a whole lot of industries into such a spin, really, because nobody really knew what's going to hit them. Business models have slightly pivoted for some of them. Some of them have sort of not known how to respond to it. And that just shows the lack of preparedness or the availability of preparedness in the companies that are facing this crisis. It is the economy largely was heading towards a slowdown, at least the global markets. It isn't a surprise that, when people say that recession was going to be coming in, it certainly was. But I think this event has certainly accelerated that process. And we are currently midst of it. And apart from major economies like India and China, pretty much most of the global markets are going to be in recession. And Germany recently hit recession as well, and so many other countries are also going to follow suit. So not a pleasant situation to be in. If you were a company, if you were a country, or if you were an individual, and these are difficult times. Given that humankind has always looked at these challenges, has come out of it. Even if you look at the Great Depression in the America in the 30s, or the oil crisis, bunch of things happened, but things prevailed and things continued. So I guess this will also be that, just that it's a once in a lifetime event. Either we are lucky or unlucky to be able to witness it.
I think as you mentioned that it's a black swan event, and whether it's recession is accelerated. It's one in a lifetime event, and this are kind of not so great news for individuals, particularly for people who are doing MBA this year. The current crop of batch, which would be coined as the COVID batch going forward. And generally, as you say, like human is all about adapting, and I think that's what humans have done over a period of time. So how do you think the current economic scenario is affects the current crop of COVID batch, and how do you think they can adapt from here on?
All right. So I think at the core for the current cohort that's pursuing the one-year MBA, it's important to reconsider the intent behind pursuing the MBA in the first place. I think it really starts with that, and it must be really a strong need, and I really hope it is a strong need for you to pursue the MBA. Otherwise, there isn't much direction that you could perhaps take, or at least the decision and the choices that you will make, either in terms of the kind of projects that you will do or the kind of electives that you will pick. It would be rudderless, if you will. So I think at the core, it's important to consider or reconsider the intent behind doing the MBA, because that is really going to set the tone in terms of how you're going to approach this whole this year that you will be in the MBA program. So for many, it can be upskilling. It could be cross-skilling in some sense as well. And you're looking at perhaps ways in which you can nurture these skills through a structured program. That's really the focus. An MBA program, a structured MBA program from good schools will really get you there. Then of course there is having these skills and being able to learn these from great faculty, good faculty. That's again something which you cannot expect in any other micro courses, certificate courses. That will not get you that, right? So I think if you are in, it is not like you're stuck here. It's actually a great opportunity because it gives you the time to cool off, not really bother about what's going on. You need to be aware of what's going on outside, but really focus on what's available in front of you and do the most that you can over there. And oftentimes it is understated about the peer network, and very little is done to get to know from each other. And I strongly urge all of y'all to be able to look into your fellow classmates, look at what skill set they bring, because everybody has a new perspective, right? And a very different perspective than you bring. And these are these perspectives that can allow you to shape your thinking and possibly look at solutions in a different light. And that's really the learning that a peer network can definitely bring. So and it is definitely no different from doing an MBA, even if it were a non-COVID situation, right? It's just the same. The fundamentals remain the same. Now, the question could be, how would the next year look like, right? Of course, the placements is always something which individuals will always be cognizant about. And these are tough questions to answer. We really do not know how things will shape up. We expect, things to start recovery in the next year. The IMF has given good projections for the Indian market for the next year, and we hope that it will turn out that way. But again, these are things that, you cannot control, right? And there are things that you can certainly control. And I would suggest that you pay more emphasis on that and do the best that you can over there.
I think this is something that we have mentioned and spoke about in our AMA as well, where we spoke about understanding the why of doing an MBA, because that's what will give you the strength to go through these times. Because it's always about a purpose, and I think it's these times when you should look at upskilling and cross-skilling yourself, as you say. But I think one thing that you mentioned, which really strikes a lot of meaning, is the peer network and learning from the peer network, because that's what MBA actually gives you. When we did our MBA, 75 people from different backgrounds, and you start learning about industry so much sitting in the classroom. But that's probably where the question is. Like, because of COVID, a lot of colleges or a lot of these one-year courses are now going online, and the whole aspect of being in college, learning from each other, learning from the peer network, being in the hostel rooms will probably be lost for a particular period of time. Now, how do you think, this would have an effect on the current batch?
Okay, so definitely I fully agree with you. There is a strong sense of physical proximity that is always beneficial, right? Whether it is those water cooler conversations before or after class, or the opportunity to discuss or pour into these case studies together, just having a different perspective, sharing your views with each other. And there are these subtle nuances in communication which are prevalent in a face-to-face conversation, which tend to get lost when you're looking at an online medium of interaction, right? Technology can make these interactions possible, but these nuances or these aspects related to body language can be best understood in person. That's something which is understood and agreed by many people. But I certainly think there will be a slight impact, right? But not limiting oneself to these these classes or these online platforms where instruction is offered. I think the cohort can also look at and consider having these virtual workspaces, out of their own volition, where they create these workspaces as a means and ways to be connected. Of course, there's telephone calls, there's one-on-one interactions, but as a class, you might want to have some of these scheduled yourself, right? And an opportunity for you to connect as a cohort together, and that togetherness is something which and there is a risk of that getting lost when you don't meet each other in a classroom kind of a setting. So that's something which I would strongly advocate. And there are many such tools which are available. And thanks to technology, these should allow for you to be able to connect with each other, albeit virtually.
Right. It makes so much sense today, particularly because almost like our job, and this is what we also touched upon in the AMA, all our job is basically virtual. Like I sit in the laptop and I work with the teams all across the globe. So in a way, if we look at it, this also gives us an opportunity to learn a skill set that probably wasn't taught in the traditional one-year MBAs, but probably the new world requires it to be taught. So, maybe it's something that we are getting prepared for in the new world.
I guess to that point, virtualization, managing virtual teams could be a mainstream subject going forward in an MBA course, right? I guess Praveen, picking up thing that you were talking about, the whole changed MBA pedagogy, and I think yesterday or day before yesterday, the IIM Ahmedabad PGPX program was inaugurated for the first time virtually.
Yeah, I read that news.
Obviously, it is a very different kind of a feeling for all the students who are venturing there. I know there's a lot of discussion about the whole ROI perspective and all. And one thing that me and Sapta have always talked about in our sessions prior to this is that we should always look at MBA as a long-term investment and not just a short-term investment, right? A short-term investment could be a placement agency, but a long-term investment, and there is a benefit of the education that you get, right? But yes, this 1 year is going to be a tough year for students to suddenly go into that, a virtual environment and all that. And as you said, I think it is very important for students to take up this as a positive way, to take this as an opportunity to explore what are the other ways, because probably going forward, these could be ways where they would have to handle teams, they would have to handle important boardroom discussions. Tomorrow, everything, even today, there are a lot of acquisitions and discussions that happen probably in a boardroom, but all of them would be happening virtually. So business is trying to get back to business as usual, even in a virtual environment, right? So I think it is a very strange thing. But Praveen, coming to a point, right? I think in this new changed era of virtualized world and all that, I know traditionally MBA was all about learning strategy concepts, learning finance concepts, and the typical theoretical background, the fundamentals of education. But in this new background, when the companies would be looking for recruiting students from these MBA programs, say 2021, do you feel that there will be new skills that they will be looking at, and what are the skills that students can actually focus on during this 1 year of their MBA journey, so that they can actually fit well in the new kind of a resume that the recruiter is looking for?
Yeah, certainly. And also just to touch upon a little bit on what we spoke earlier, because it has a nice little segue into what I will tell. When times are tough, right? And those are times that can prepare you the best. That's something which I personally believe in. I have had myself an occasion during my master's where I was pursuing research, and this was core engineering research, and this was with a Turkish professor. Initially, I had a lot of grudge against him for him saying that after 6 months of being with him, that I could not continue with him because I was not able to meet his expectations in some way, right? Obviously, I was benchmarked with Korean researchers who were way ahead of the curve, and that was a very tough time for me, right? And I was not able to grapple with failure and grapple with those difficult circumstances. But then I was able to figure out, and that made me more stronger, more resilient about what goes on. And I think considering that, and given that this year is expected to be tough. There are a lot of learnings that the cohorts can stand to gain, when they are going through this journey. So I think that's something which they need to positively look at it in one place, right? Now coming to the skill set, the question that you asked about, what is that companies are looking for? So there's obviously there's a lot of need for folks who can solve problems creatively. It's more important than ever before, right? And if you look at instances in current times, companies that have traditionally been manufacturing automobiles have now been manufacturing ventilators, right? And they've been able to quickly pivot their process lines in order to be able to respond to what is required. And of course, the nature of their processes have enabled for that, but it also requires for highly skilled individuals who can think through, a problem at hand, creatively use the available resources in order to turn around a solution that is need of the hour. And that is really classic design thinking, if you will. Those are things which are very, very relevant. And of course, there is always a strong emphasis, and it has been in the recent past also, an emphasis on analytics and really looking at evidence-based decision making, right? And that ability for the graduates to be able to have that. Then there is, of course, strategic thinking, to be able to have a longer term picture and not just focused on the operational aspects of the current job role, and having that ability to transcend from a strategic to a tactical kind of a thought process, right? And, in challenging times, communication can become very, very important. How effective are you with your communication? Given that, these are virtual teams that you're working in, or even if it were a regular setting as well, but it really is how effective is those are those skills, whether it is with respect to persuading somebody or just communicating the value of a certain business idea, one of those many things, right? How effective are you in doing that? And then collaboration, right? I mean, it's no more, after an MBA program, you can't be, as an individual. You need to be able to work collaboratively. And that's again where the peer network during your MBA programs will certainly help figure out ways in which you collaborate with people of different ideologies. How can you work with challenging perspectives and still be able to deliver on a solution that is expected of you, right? And perhaps one last thing would be the global orientation, right? How well aware are you of what's going on? Whether it is here, whether it is in Busan in South Korea, or perhaps somewhere in Laos, right? So this is something which is expected, and we can't no more be in a shell or in having some kind of a tunneled view of things. So I think those are again skills. But if you largely look at what I said, most of them are expected any day, right? And some of them might become more important at this point in time, but some of these stand the test of time, right? And these are still largely relevant, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Praveen, I smiled when you talked about Busan, South Korea, the memories that we had
I know.
during our international immersion during our EPGP days in South Korea. But a very important point that stems out of that point, that particular statement is, I think we talked about the whole MBA pedagogy changing to online and what industry will be expecting. But I think one thing that a lot of students have reached out to us asking is, what happens to the international immersion? Because the whole purpose of the international immersion, and especially one-year program being a very cramped program anyways, those 2 weeks, 3 weeks of experience, going into a different country, interacting with people, industry experts there, was very, very valuable. Now, obviously, we don't know, what happens till the end of 2020, whether travel restrictions will still be there or not. But any thoughts on still being able to leverage some of those international connects of these various prestigious colleges? Any thoughts on that piece, and how to make this still more relevant for the students?
All right. Yeah, it's a dicey situation, right? And we don't know whether those immersion programs will happen, as in the travel will happen or not. However, something which I think most schools are becoming more and more prepared is the fact that they'll need to adapt their business models in terms of how the delivery of programs is going to be happening. And if it's being faced by students in India, I'm sure it's being faced by these programs and schools and students everywhere else as well. Now, the receptiveness to virtual immersions might increase, although it doesn't really substitute the aspect of physical travel and getting to meet and interact with people directly. But even if at all there is an opportunity where the university or the school with which your MBA program has a partnership with is open and willing to have a virtual immersion program, and it can certainly be, I mean, we've seen conferences being held completely online and having the ability to deliver great outcomes. It is certainly possible as long as it is carefully choreographed. So that is really where I think there's a strong partnership and communication and understanding between the partner universities can help translate some of these elements of the immersion program into a virtual setting as well. And it can be possible, and I think schools can work towards that. And if that is possible, still there will be some learnings and outcomes that will be taken away. Of course, if you look at it, immersion programs tend to have an element of a live project or a case that students are working on. And if you were to look at it, it never really happens that you're working on the case at that point in time. You eventually come back and then you work on it. So it is no different that way, just the fact that you may not necessarily have that first-hand physical understanding, proximity based understanding of what it really is, but a virtual session or so can certainly help you fill those gaps, and there can be still value gained from such an immersion program. But yeah, I mean, of course, there's no substitute, and I really hope that all of this crisis will end soon and there will be opportunities to travel to some of these programs. Maybe if not at the pre-scheduled times, but maybe at a later time if the school is flexible enough for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what we will do is, from the whole perspective of course, we'll again move back on your profile, a part of which is building partnership with industries. And as we know, while the purpose of an MBA is to understand, management knowledge, management education, how it is relevant, I think one of the key questions is also about placements. And the situation today is almost all the industries have been hit. But then, there are industries such as pharma industry are looking for an earlier bounce back. So what do you think, like the typical kind of student profiles that come into a college, the kind of organizations that come for recruitment, which are the industries that are looking for an early bounce back, and which are the industries that the students can look for?
Okay, so generally, I would say that, firstly, there are few or no industries that haven't been benefited or impacted by technology. And that comes from somebody who's very closely associated with technology, right? And, since the past decade or so, there's been a lot of technology-enabled businesses that have demanded MBA graduates, skill set from the MBA graduates, which are coming out of these schools. Now, those opportunities will certainly remain, while I do believe that there will be newer job roles that will also start to emerge, given that we can expect certain fundamental behavioral changes in consumer buying in a post-COVID world. And, that might trigger such new job roles to emerge. So that being said, I would say that, as long as it doesn't matter whether students come from a traditional industry or a non-traditional industry, it is very important for students to be able to showcase these transferable skills, right? And if you're able to demonstrate that, again, when you look at the kind of job roles, if you were to ask where you can actually demonstrate these transferable competencies, you can look at sales and marketing, operational excellence, project management, program management, and these are all really roles which are often asked from the industry. And even today, I'm sure the companies would be wanting those. And look at operations, right? Operations has been a nightmare for a lot of companies today. Now, if somebody is still having those skills, and I expect a lot of these fresh graduates next year will have those skills, it will become more and more relevant, right? And they're looking at those who are able to demonstrate those skills even at times like a Black Swan event. So those fundamental recruitment patterns will remain. However, I do predict that there will be newer job roles that will start to emerge from the next few years onwards. So, and the best way for you to prepare yourself as a passing cohort next year is to definitely strengthen your case, for a job offer by demonstrating how you've been able to apply yourself to these different skills across different verticals. So maybe if you come from a core oil and gas industry, and you pick up a case study or multiple case studies related to IT, or telecommunications or technology and telecommunications, that just shows that, hey, it doesn't matter whether you're from an oil and gas sector or not. You just have the ability to be able to transcend into newer industry verticals, make your business assessment, and come up with your recommendations, right? So that just shows that you are capable of being able to function in non-traditional industries, and at the same time have those skill set that can be transferred across these industries.
I think that's a very good point, Praveen, because if you look at it, like both me and Dave come from very traditional industries. He comes from manufacturing. I come from power industry, and we are currently in a finance world. And as you correctly mentioned, that it does not mean that we are actually doing finance. We are doing project management within a finance organization, and those are transferable skill sets. However, a question that has come in multiple times, even in our AMA and the Google form that we circulated before this YouTube live, is our students from the core industries are in certain disadvantage, and particularly because one, the core industries anyways come very less for recruitment. Two, manufacturing is halted everywhere with all the social distancing norms coming. The consumption patterns have changed, and the third and most important part is, considering now that the IT cohort itself is quite a lot, our organizations looking to look over their shoulders and look for people with a diverse background, people coming from a power industry or a manufacturing. So do you think they are in certain kind of a disadvantage at this point?
No, I certainly don't think it's a disadvantage. I'm also not so sure if it's an advantage. I know it's a very diplomatic answer if somebody were to listen to me and say that, but I'll tell you why. I'll try to substantiate it, right? So a disadvantage mainly because when you look at a cohort that is having a large proportion of IT background or IT experienced candidates, what happens is that there is a collective pull of recruiters as a result of that concentration. And when you have probably a handful of the students that in the cohort, which is from a power industry, for example, they cannot command for a recruiter to walk into the campus, and that is just how it is. And that is the unfortunate nature of the placement aspect. However, that should not deter candidates, because there's always a demand, of course, in the traditional settings as well, because having the ability to understand problems in a newer manner, which is what the MBA program is going to teach them, traditional industries will definitely be keen on picking them up. Now, of course, if somebody wants to move beyond the traditional industry, like I said, the transferable competencies have to come to the fore. How can you prepare yourself is, like we started out with this session, right? What is the direction that you have? What is the intent? What is the strong motivation that you have? And that would sort of define, let's say I want to get into a company like Google or an Amazon, then I would rather orchestrate every decision and choice that I will do to be able to suit to my potential recruitment opportunity that I will have with one of these companies, right? And the steps that I will take will be accordingly. So if I were to pick a case study, if I have the choice, the option of picking up from a few choices, and e-commerce happens to be one among them, I will pick that if I were to be wanting to get into Amazon, right? And I want to solve a case study as a part of my coursework. And then I will try to build a narrative of multiple cases, projects that I have done across the coursework, that would allow for me to, or even competitions. I don't know how in this COVID world we'll have these competitions happen, but even if they do, and it could also be held virtually, and if these are competitions related to, again, an e-commerce theme, what you're trying to indicate to Amazon as a potential employer is that, hey, I know that I'm coming from a traditional industry, and I'm not trying to remove that, and in fact I'm proud of what I have achieved in that setting, but I also am demonstrating that I have developed that understanding of your market as well, and given an opportunity, I'll be happy to prove that. And there is no other way to prepare yourself to get to that kind of a setting, and that is something which I would suggest the students to do. The second thing which I would also encourage, and I certainly do that from time to time whenever I speak with MBA candidates, is to make their own attempts, and it's just like any other scenario. Just the fact that you are not in employment, you are in an MBA program, and you reach out to people, and you might want to reach out to people with the intent of seeking mentorship or advice, and that is it's a Trojan horse kind of an entry that you will have with that individual, and then develop that sense of confidence through these multiple conversations you might have with that person, and then through that there is a trust building that will happen, as against, hey, I am looking for a job opportunity in your company, right? So both are different scenarios. So I would suggest to take those steps as well, in anticipation of things that may not go well. I'm not saying they will not, but I always like to be prepared. A plan B is always something which I'd love to have, and I would suggest the same, where you can have these plans kick-started right now itself. We are in April, the class has been inaugurated. Already start making plans from now. Who are your target companies? Who are the potential alums from those target companies that you might want to reach out to? Say hello, get to interact with them, and then that is another path that you might want to choose in order to sort of cement or better your chances with respect to placements.
Yeah, so I think, Sapta, this reminds me of one of the discussions that we were having in our previous AMA session. Praveen, we were, something similar came up, and, we kind of talked about how networking has to be mutually beneficial and not just about, asking for jobs. And, I think a lot of us do end up doing networking during the placement season, wherein eventually we end up, asking for job opportunities rather than really building that relationship. So very rightly said, the relationship and the efforts, not just for placement, but for growth in your career, needs to start from day one. And the whole MBA program should be used as an opportunity to connect with alumni, with people of similar interests, even professors, right? And I know a lot of times what we do is we kind of just involve ourselves with just alumni and our cohort, but we forget that there are a lot of learned professors in our colleges who have their own connects. But you need to make it mutually beneficial for those people also, right? So yeah, very rightly said. So, but I think just picking up one of the questions that did come up in our Google form, as well as somebody asking on the live show also, is that with all the kind of uncertainty that is there in the market as of now, and you talked about the optimism that we should look at it. The people have been talking about, and I think it links with the why that you picked up the first when we started, is do you feel that the people should look at postponing their MBA to the next year, or is it okay to take the plunge now?
Okay, so this is there cannot be a generic answer to this, right? There's always a risk propensity that is attached to every individual, and there needs to be a strong assessment of that individual's current context. Whether that context allows for making that switch right away to an MBA program, or is it better to wait it out, right? And those are factors pertinent to family, financial situation, confidence in one's ability to get a job after graduating. And these are always questions that will be there on every individual's mind. And all of these will lead into the ability to take risks. So I wouldn't say, whether it is a right time or not. For some people, it definitely is a great time. I can tell you that. And I've known that they have consciously taken that plunge. And for others, those who feel that they are tilting towards a conservative side, they rather wait it out, because there's obviously a question of ROI. There's huge investment that is there, that is going to go into the program. So and uncertainty doesn't help with individuals such as that, right? And it's very difficult to take those choices. So it is expected that those who have already been offered an admit, in case the programs have not begun, they might be seeking a deferment to the next year, and I wouldn't be surprised, because that's just the human nature, right? So there's no real answer to what you have asked, but I think it depends really. The classic answer, it depends.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that surely makes sense. And I think that's also part of the whole purpose of when we do our learnings during our MBA, that you need to time your moves, and timing of the moves would completely be dependent on your, as you said, your risk propensity, and your planning. And there'll be people who'd be okay to experiment for another year without the job of their choice, maybe after the MBA. Some people looking at immediate financial benefits. So yes, completely agreed, there is no generic answer to it.
It's something that I would like to add out here. It is very important. Like, if an individual feels he is in the wrong role, in the wrong industry, and has already hit a glass ceiling, and feels that I have much more to do, dude, this is the time for you. Like, there's no point being on the fences and feel that the world is gonna change, because if you have to change the world, you have to go out there and change it. So I think, as you rightly pointed out, it's the risk propensity and how much you are going to take it. I think that's true about any business decisions, and MBA is a business decision at the end of the day.
Absolutely, fully agree.
And it's an engaging session. We are almost reaching to the end of it. So I think one of the questions that I really want to ask you, Praveen, is what has been the impact of 1 year MBA in Praveen's life? And it's a very important question, because all of us have spent like 5 or 6 years post out MBA. How has it changed you? Like, looking back, wisdom in hindsight, does it make sense?
It does, and it has had a profound impact, that I can certainly tell. One, confidence, right? And it gives you, I really don't know, is it whether because of the skill set that I have picked up, or because I've done well in my courses, or because I've won a global marketing competition, or I've landed a job which I thought I would probably not get in another setting, right? I don't know. Or is it just the name and the tag of a premier MBA school attached to my CV? All of those, could be playing together individually. I don't know, but I definitely can tell you that it has given me a whole lot of confidence in my ability to take these drastic decisions that I have done in the past, in the recent past, that is. I wouldn't have thought myself that I would be able to get into a venture capital industry of all industries, right? It's an industry, due to whatever reason, is very closed for MBA candidates, probably, and those without a finance background, right? I don't have a finance background. So it all boils down to how, those instances during the MBA have really crafted and been able to, or have allowed me to position myself in this manner, is something which I definitely think confidence has a certain role to play. Secondly, I think by the virtue of the affiliation that comes, that you are from an IIM Bangalore and MBA, there is, not that, I wouldn't say that maybe people start to lend more credibility to what you say, right? And you also have to have a sense of responsibility, in terms of what you say, given that association that you have. So one, for given that I have also seen me being invited to some conferences and events which previously I was not invited to, and that is an indication for me that people recognize that there is a certain there are certain thoughts and views that I can potentially offer, and that is something which I have seen. These are subtle changes and subtle aspects to how people have started to respond to, which I have seen differ from the time that I was not I was without an MBA. The third is also when it comes to approaching job opportunities, right? It's no more a CV really. It's I mean, of course, the CV as a process that will always be there, but by the strength of the profile that I have right now, and after the MBA, reaching out to people on LinkedIn has yielded more productive outcomes than what it was during the pre-MBA times, right? And there is it has opened up new opportunities while at work, for me to really, and I've been in marketing or sales kind of roles, right? And I need to engage and interact with people. So it has certainly added a lot of value, wherein I've had these conversations, to take shape, to move forward much faster than what it was before. So I would say these, and apart from the peer network, which I constantly harp upon, there's always that sense of understanding that if there is anybody that I need to go out to for help, I know there is a group, there's a cohort that I can always hinge on, right? So that is also something which is understated, but I'd really like to highlight that.
Right, and it's so important. I think there are three things that is really important that has come out. One is that there are three people on this call who have done finance and don't come from financial background. I think that's what an MBA gives you, and this is very important to understand because it's not we are being trained to become managers. So we are industry agnostic if you can use our management skill set. The second thing is about the peer network. You are probably sitting with a bunch of people who would be the business leaders tomorrow, and it's very important to build those connects. And it's very important to leverage them for a long time. And the third thing is how MBA kind of opens doors. It's a foot in the door. We have always spoken about it. It's kind of a long-term ROI game. So it will give you opportunities. And what you do out of those opportunities depends on you. For example, you are now in Two2Tango because of your MBA, and that's the fun of it. It's all about the part of peer networking. And one last thing that I want to ask you is from this forum, looking at the vantage point of where you are, what is your advice to the COVID batch of MBA students?
All right. So I really don't like giving advices to begin with, but since you've asked, I'll keep it short, right? So first is, guys, stay safe. It's very important at times like these. You'll have to make sure that you're well, you're healthy, and you're able to, finish your MBA program. That's very, very important. Stay strong. Times are tough, and it really can get you to a state where you are worried, constantly worried, and that also doesn't help. And if you need help, seek help, right? And I'm sure the programs that you are currently in will have such opportunities where you will be able to talk to people so that you are able to relieve yourself of any of such stress that is getting built up in you. And then think smart, right? And be smart about how you utilize your time while you are during the 1 year MBA program. There are multiple opportunities that will be available and that typically are available to you, just that how you are able to utilize that time effectively for your own benefit. Because time just flies, and I've seen that happen. I really wished that time did not fly during my MBA time as fast as it did, but that is just the reality, right? And the hectic nature of the program will see the time run so quickly that you just don't want to look back maybe a year or two later that, oh, I wish I did this differently. You don't want that to happen, right? And enjoy the company of your peers, right? Learn from each other. And I wish you good luck, great success. These are unique times, and I'm sure these will be memorable.
Absolutely. And I think Praveen, as you mentioned, right, we all kind of now remember the 1 year MBA days and wish it was much more than 1 year. At least it should have been much more than 1 year. And like we've talked, right, there have been this is a black swan event, but then imagine when in the 20s and 30s the Great Depression happened. I'm sure somebody at that time, if the word was coined already, people would have said this is a black swan event. The same could have happened in the World War, right? The World War I, the World War II, any sort of big crisis that the world has faced. And I think what we have also seen, and is important to be optimistic, is that out of each of these big events, unfortunately, they are unlucky and not so positive events, but a lot of positives have come out. I'm sure a lot of new companies spurred out because of the World War. A lot of new financial thought process came out because of the whole depression or the 2008 financial crisis. So there is always a point of optimism, and there is always a point which says after some time you'll just remember, look back in the history book and say, oh, there was an event like that. You would have moved on. But how well you've equipped yourself to take care of the things that have changed beyond that event is going to make sure that how well you tread forward in the future, and don't look back at that event and saying, oh, I failed there, right? So I think very, very valid, very valid point. We're almost at the close of our session. We've had about 50 minutes of interesting.
Wow, didn't realize.
With Praveen, absolutely, I didn't realize it. So what I'll do is, before I literally pass and have the closing comments, I want to go through a couple of questions that we had on the Google form as well as on the live chat. and just see if we want to pick some specific items. I know we've talked a lot about placements. Any thoughts on how the placement should be handled this year? Any changes from what we've been doing like in the 1 year programs earlier? Any thoughts on that?
I think the Placecom should certainly already reach out to the hiring coordinators at the companies, getting a sense of what the mood is like. You don't want to anticipate, you'd rather like to get things clear in your mind right away, so that you know what kind of countermeasures that you might need to take as a Placecom in order to mitigate any such risks that you might have at a later point in time when the actual season begins. You might also want to understand, given the current scenario, I mean, you might not get all answers right away. I'm speaking from a Placecom perspective right now, but it applies to even individuals. It's important to get those initial sounding ideas coming in from the industry as to what would be more relevant. And obviously companies are also crystal balling into what it would be like in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year. And these are active conversations, and these are evolving in nature. So what might be true today might not be holding good maybe a month or two later. So it's important to stay connected with the hiring teams in order to stay relevant, so that you don't end up seeing a surprise at a later point in time. That would just be devastating, because you would be hinging your expectations based on some preconceived notions which you do not want to have. And this year is going to be starkly different, and hence I would advise more preparation and more more communication happening with the hiring teams in order to stay close to the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a pretty valid point, that this time it has to be a much longer, interaction with the placement as well as the hiring people. The actual placement season obviously would depends on the hiring schedules of the companies. One question, and I think it is a rather generic question, but it'll be interesting to see in the current format of things happening, is that if we really tend to get into this whole virtual mode again of even education. I know even IIM Bangalore is one of the pioneers of the MOOC programs and all that stuff. If a lot of this quality management education goes into virtual mode, do you feel, and again, we're not fortune tellers, so I'm okay with you not answering it, but still want to see your thoughts in terms of any impact on your program fees. I know return of investment is a big thing for an MBA, and if it's in the virtual environment, do you feel that there could be thought processes or pressures from the student side of impacting the program fees for such programs also?
There could be, because it all depends on how the product. Now, of course, MBA program is like a product, right? And if you're looking to dilute it, and the perception is there's a dilution of the product through these virtualization of these education instruction, right? And the perception, and if the perception is very strong, and it is not as close as a substitute to the original product, then there will be demand for the fee to be reduced. You will start to see that if the programs don't do a good job at virtualizing the education, and I think world-class programs will be able to virtualize it very well. They have the ability, ability not just monetarily, but also the ability to think through how the learning outcomes can still be effective even on a virtual setting. And if they are able to deliver that despite a virtual setting, then I don't think there will be any perception of dilution in quality, and hence potentially no rollback in terms of the fees. But for those programs which are not able to, might see a pushback, and might also see a downward revision of rankings, FT rankings, that might start to emerge. Perhaps a few years later, you might see some reflection of that.
I think the whole point of FT ranking is going to be very interesting. Probably 2 years down the lane, once the impact of the current batch happens on the rankings. But yeah, I think Sapta, unless you want to add on something, going through the questions, I think majority of the questions have rolled around placements and the industries that we want to. We did touch upon those things across the conversation. Any specific thing you want to call out before we close out?
We've touched upon all the questions. We've touched upon what we wanted to speak with Praveen. I think what's important is, it's during difficult times, the strong leaders emerge. And this is the education that gives you the ability to become strong leaders for the future, because organizations will rely on your shoulders. Organization will rely on your decisions to take them through the difficult times. So if you shy away from the difficult times, that raises a question whether you have the ability to take the organization through during the difficult times or not. So think about this. These are important, and it's at the end of the day, what this education will give you is a new perspective. Placements will eventually happen. It always happens. So you should not worry about that. It's very important, as Praveen mentioned, to network early, to build relationships early. I think that's the key. That's the the entire job world, after your MBA is all on the relationships that you make. And I think that goes in a long way. So enjoy your 1-year MBA. Just as Praveen said, it's going to come once in a lifetime, not a black swan, but definitely a white swan. and you should enjoy it. Maintain relationships with the profs, with your peers, and do what you have not done. Experiment. I think that's the most important thing. You will only learn if you experiment. With this, Praveen, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having such an engaging conversation on a Sunday. Highly appreciate it. And we'll be looking forward to more such conversations with you.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure talking to you all. Less of a Q&A and more of a conversation is how I felt this to be. And, thanks for inviting me to this once again. And I hope, whosoever has been listening or will listen to this will find whatever we've discussed useful. And if at all, there are further questions, I'm available on LinkedIn, happy to connect and exchange ideas.
Fantastic.
Thanks
Viewers,
a lot, Praveen.
Yeah. Yes, and to our viewers, I think thank you for joining in on a Sunday morning. Whenever you watch it, do send your comments in. If you need to have another session, if you need to kind of answer more questions, we will do it both, as a tete-a-tete, or we will just reply back to you. But we'll keep the conversation going. I think that's the purpose of Two2Tango, to be in connect, to help you through your MBA days. With that, over to you, Dave.
Absolutely, and rightly said, Praveen and Sapta. I think it's all about connecting with the people and sharing your thoughts so that others can benefit with our experiences. And as Sapta mentioned, thanks Praveen for the valuable time. I know Sundays in these work from home environments are even more necessary and important. So we won't take more time of yours. And thanks all the viewers who joined us live. And look forward to your comments. Do like our channel and subscribe to our channel. We're looking forward to more such tete-a-tete series with speakers like Praveen, who can share their thoughts on the relevant topics that we have. So with this, we'll sign off. It's been great talking to you, Praveen. And Sapta, let's sign off in our typical way. So yes. We sign off. This is Sapta.
This is Dave. And
we are Two2Tango. Bye, guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye.